And I suppose those aspects you've just described might sound entirely benign, but you also write, as you suggested earlier, about the Jews increasingly being singled out as a cause of Mary's pain. So it's got a darker obverse than simply being
it's got a very dark side, and it's once you notice it, you can't stop noticing it in a way, because it's exactly that. If you look at devotional writings, and also we have to remember that this devotional poetry that develops in the Middle Ages, it's in all the vernaculars. It's not just Latin for a precious few. It's really there in the dialects of people, in the various dialects of Italian and of German and so on. So this is a poetry of devotion that people could do, outside the church, even at home or looking at an image, and it directs them absolutely to remember Mary at the foot of the cross, and at the very same time, literally in the same words and sentences, who is the author of the suffering? Who is the author of this pain? Of course, the Jews. And sometimes even creating little exchanges or little dialogues between Mary to the Jew, blaming the Jew, complaining to the Jew, why have you done this? So the nexus of, the whole context of devotional contemplation of the crucifixion becomes one extremely rich with sort of anti-Jewish sensibilities, and in a very sort of emotional way, yeah.
I wondered, Miri, if I could just ask you in conclusion, you talked about the paucity of sources right back at the beginning, and yet you trace this vast explosion of different renditions of Mary and views of Mary. And does it all, if one wants to boil it all down in conclusion, does it boil down to maternality, as you say in the last page of your book, to motherhood? Is that really the essence of the sort of generative power of all these Marys throughout history?
I think that must be true, but I want to say that in a way that isn't sort of banal, just reducing everything to, everything is in everything and every culture is the same. Not at all. But rather to say that there is tremendous potential in whatever culture it is, tremendous potential to contemplate the ineffable love, the deep, deep intimacy between mother and son, and particularly when it's the son in whom are invested the greatest expectations and hopes, which is, of course, the son who is a god. And, of course, every culture that Christians came to, when you think of the encounter of, the early missionaries, the Franciscans who came to Mexico, for example, they found there, of course, deep wells of devotional practices, of liturgies, of cults, of holy places devoted to that sacred fertility, fecundity, and solace that is the figure of the mother, of the sort of second childbearing woman thing. So to take that and to appreciate that in Christianity, this image became aligned with the expectation of salvation, with procedures of sacraments and so on, is to take something that's available universally and to historicize it, to make it specific to Christian cultures and so on. But is also to say that where there was purpose and there is the sort of creative intelligence, obviously missionaries and those who engaged new Christians in all sorts of parts of the world, and particularly in appalling circumstances post-conquest and whatnot, could actually build on something that is familiar. If you approach, the Nahuatl with the figure of a mother and child and the figure of the crucifixion, I would have thought that the mother and child was indeed more available to work with, particularly at the beginning of an encounter. And we do see that it was taken up to tremendous extent and very, very creatively by new Christians amongst the indigenous peoples of the Americas, and of course also in other parts of the world, in Africa, in Asia, always with that local spin, always with that local articulation. But in a way, that's just the way it was in Europe as well, wasn't it? I mean, Mary of different regions and different places being worked through local issues of aesthetics and taste, and local materials as well, to see what's available to people.
Miri Rubin, Mother of God, A History of the Virgin Mary, is available now in paperback. Full details on ordering the book can be found at blackwell.co.uk.